Hello everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today I'd like to discuss more on our favorite subject, subspace. Now I have a video that I did earlier where I covered the basics of subspace, what it is, what causes it, all of that good stuff. So if you haven't seen that already and you're confused about what this topic even is, please make sure you check that video out because that is going to explain everything that I'm referencing in this video. Now, today what I want to focus on are the myths and misunderstandings that surround the experience of subspace. The risks that we don't talk about, the things that we glorify, and the things that I just think people don't really understand. So that is what we're going to be going into today. One of the reasons why I delayed so long on making videos about subspace is online, and I mean even in the real life community, to be honest, we really over-glorify and over-emphasize the experience of subspace. It's sort of like how we treat slaves as being on the pedestal, like this complete perfect archetype of what it means to be in service. You know, slaves are absolutely the pinnacle, the best of the best, the creme de la creme. And I think we kind of also bring that attitude into subspace as well. We treat it as though this is the absolute pinnacle of a BDSM experience. Getting a really deep subspace with your partner is the best thing you will ever experience in BDSM. And there's so many stories online and all sorts of pictures with descriptions of how they felt during the scene and how amazing the subspace was, and it just gets talked about constantly. It's a thing that gets brought up over and over again. And I have found through questions I've gotten and comments and just interacting with people that this constant exposure to the idea of subspace has led people to believe that if you didn't go into subspace, it wasn't a good scene. If you don't have subspace, it was a bad scene, or you're ill-matched with your partner, that subspace is the only thing that you should be focusing on. And I think that just loses so much of the nuance that is the BDSM experience. Because really, I think when you are chasing after subspace, you're chasing after the high. And that is not necessarily inherently a bad thing because, hey, it's in our brain, and our own bodies are causing us to have this high, so I'm not trying to, say that you shouldn't have that experience necessarily, but I think the emphasis on that as the pinnacle of everything that you should be doing in BDSM is very short-sighted. BDSM can be wonderful and lovely and fulfilling and connective in so many ways where you never experience subspace at all, whether you're trying or not, or whether you want to or not. In fact, I would say there are a lot of scenes that happen where going into a deep subspace would actually be counterproductive to the purpose of the scene itself. Sometimes, you know, having that high floaty feeling can be really nice, but if you are in a scene where you need to be you're on point, you're under stress, you're in predicament bondage, something like that, maybe going into subspace wouldn't be the best idea. Maybe you want to have something where you're totally in complete communication with your partner, and maybe subspace would interrupt that. And again, I think it just goes back to that lack of nuance around what the BDSM experience is. I think we talk about this because, like so many things, is the easiest way to explain why people do BDSM. Oh, people do all this crazy shit because it makes them high? Okay, duh, of course. Now I understand why people do all this crazy shit. They're just doing it so they can feel high. I get it. That's the easiest way to explain it to many people, and they don't really look further than that. It's much harder to understand the deep fulfillment and contentment and connection that can come with a scene, even if there is no subspace involved. And regardless of the reasoning behind it, I think focusing on it is sort of, it's never going to be really something that works out for people, because when you focus on it, it gets harder to find. The more you are sitting there and going, I need to get into subspace, I need to go into subspace, why am I not in subspace yet? Everything in the scene is going wrong. Your brain is freaking out, it's stressing out, and you're not being in the now. You're not focusing on the sensations. You're focusing on trying to make something happen. You know, it's like when people say, you know, don't think about a pink elephant, and suddenly you're thinking about the pink elephant. When you think about subspace, your brain is staying active. Your brain is staying engaged in am I in subspace yet? What's this feeling? Am I going there yet? Am I there yet? Am I there yet? Am I there yet? And that constant little zzz in your brain about am I there yet or not, and that paranoia is actually causing you to not get there. So if you want to be able to get into subspace, the first thing you have to do is let go of the ideal of subspace as part or the goal of the scene. This is not to say that you should never do it. And maybe if you are in a relationship where you have played with a partner a lot, you know that you have a reliable way of getting to subspace, then maybe it makes sense to plan for like, hey, this is a scene where I want to have sort of a floaty, blissed out experience. I wouldn't even maybe like say literally I want to go into subspace, but maybe think about the physiological feelings, the positive things that you connect to subspace, rather than specifically trying to get into one state of mind, because you may or may not get there. So I would think about more producing the sort of emotions you want to have in the scene, the sort of feelings and sensations you want to experience, more so than the simplistic thought of, I want to go into subspace. The other reason is that subspace is not a reliable thing at all for most people. It is simply a function of the body, and like having orgasms, some people are very orgasmic. All they need is quick manual stimulation and they're done, and that's it. Other people can only orgasm and they can only achieve that like once a month during the full moon, and they have to do it for like 2 hours, and even then sometimes it doesn't really work and it's like really unreliable. Like each person's body is very individual, and the way that your brain responds to certain physical inputs and certain chemical responses is something that you can't really control. Like you can't tell your body, please react to these hormones in this specific manner. It's just not something that you really have control over. So I don't think that we should spend time blaming ourselves, blaming our scenes, blaming our partners for our brains not being able to just simply do the thing that we have ordered them to be able to produce. Instead, I would move, or attempt to move at least, more towards a pathway of acceptance about the experience in the moment that you're having it. And rather than focusing on that, I want to go into subspace, I want my brain to do this thing, just focus on, I'm going to have a good connective experience. I'm going to try a new thing. I'm going to see where my pain tolerance is at. Whatever it is, that goal, focus on where you are in the moment once you've kind of set up what that goal is. Just focusing on being in the now, being present in the moment, being present on those positive sensations that you're feeling, or being aware of the negative sensations that may be preventing you from going into the particular headspace that you want. And just kind of being awareness, letting things kind of, not holding on to any thoughts, just letting them pass over you, not judging them, not trying to make them go one way or the other, just going, okay, here's my experience now, and now, and now, and here's what I'm experiencing now, and just having all of that be part of what you're doing. The other reason why I don't really like this idea of this focus on subspace is it ends up treating the dominant or the top partner as like a need fulfillment machine. And I've touched on this in a couple other videos because I think this is something that we're kind of bad at as humans, is like not just treating people as like you push a button and candy comes out and the candy is subspace and the button you push is another person. That's not how life should work. It's not like, oh, I'll find this person, I'll take my partner, we'll do the scene, and I'll go into subspace, and that's what we're going to do. Because what that does is it completely cuts your partner out of the equation of your experience. BDSM, be that something between a dominant and submissive, pick up play partners, switches, whatever it is, I think fundamentally, good BDSM comes from a place where you're emphasizing mutual enjoyment of the scene. Now, enjoyment in BDSM is kind of a fuzzy word because sometimes a submissive enjoying something means that they're bleeding and crying. So it's not necessarily a like happy sunshine and smiles type enjoyment, but something where both people are getting what they need out of that scene. And if you are so focused on your own individual experience of achieving that high, the only thing that matters, or increasingly what matters, I mean, if you are a good person, you'll probably still be thinking about your partner to some degree, but rather than emphasizing the mutual experiencing of a scene, rather than emphasizing the teamwork aspect and growing together and finding that connection, you're just like, okay, what can I tell this person to do that will make me feel this way? Rather than thinking about how to incorporate their needs into a scene, what they want to experience, what emotional state they want to go into. Not to mention the fact that not all doms are comfortable playing with subspace. It's just like assumed that like dominants are comfortable with this experience because it allows them to have complete control over the situation. I know a lot of dominants who are like fucking terrified of the idea of their submissive suddenly going into subspace because it means that they're not able to verbalize with their partner anymore. And while I don't necessarily agree that this is a best practice if it can be avoided, like, people will just end scenes if somebody like goes non-communicative because it makes them so uncomfortable. They're afraid of violating somebody else's consent. They're afraid that they've done something wrong. They don't understand what this person can't give them feedback anymore. And if you don't talk about it, especially before the scene, that you want to go into subspace and that happens simply because you assumed that was going to be the goal of the scene, you've now put your partner in a really bad place. And again, even if you do talk about it beforehand, it shouldn't necessarily be an assumption that your partner is just going to be okay with it and is going to want to do that for every single scene. Because sometimes, especially dominants, will want to do scenes for their pleasure, funnily enough. So, you know, it's a balancing act. And I really just want to encourage people to, you know, if you want to go into subspace, please talk about that actively with your partner, but don't make it the sole focus of a scene. Don't like try to micromanage your brain into trying to make it happen, because it's just not going to be there. And even if you've never been in subspace, even if you've only done it once or twice, if you're not able to do it reliably, or if you don't feel comfortable going there, that is all perfectly valid. Having or not having subspace is not what makes somebody submissive. Having or not having subspace is not what makes somebody a service bottom or a pet or little or any of these things. None of these things are a requirement for doing BDSM. The only thing really that matters at the end of the day is having that good consent, healthy consensual BDSM. That is what matters. And you can have that, you can have good scenes without subspace ever being in the mix. Now, that's my rant about overemphasizing the beauty of subspace. Let's talk about some of the risks, because we get so wrapped up in all of that romantic notion of, oh, my dominant's going to beat me and I'm going to be in this beautiful, blissful state, that we forget to talk about the dangers of subspace, which I like to keep it real on this channel, and I am not going to sugarcoat things, and I think that this is something that everybody should know about. So we're going to talk about the risks. Subspace is something that is very easy to manipulate. If you are not expecting to go into subspace, or if you are doing this with a partner that you don't trust, if you're doing it in a private home, if you don't have access to help, or other people are not monitoring you, there are, unfortunately, unscrupulous people out there who will use somebody's subspace against them in order to get them to do things during a scene that they would not have otherwise agreed to. Sometimes this can happen by accident because you are not in full control of your body, and sometimes you just say things that you don't mean to say, and your brain just doesn't process things the way that it normally would. But some people will use subspace as a way to get people to do things. There are several known predators in my local community and also nationally within the United States who would specifically do this and had numerous complaints against them, where they would negotiate for one thing in a scene. They would wait until the person went into subspace. They would then initiate sexual touch or some other kind of non-negotiated play, and then do it and then say it was okay because the person was in subspace. I would basically treat subspace like being drunk, because basically your brain is full of drugs. And when your brain is full of drugs, it can't make good rational decisions. So unless you know your body really, really well, unless you know your partner really, really well, I don't recommend negotiating mid-scene in any case, but especially if you are experiencing subspace. Obviously, you don't really have control over like necessarily what you say if you're really deep into it, but that's kind of why you shouldn't do subspace if you can help it, or like, how do I say this? Basically, I would not just go willy-nilly into a scene with the goal of doing subspace with somebody that you don't know well, because those things can happen. Now, it can be completely outside of your control and bad things happen, and if it does happen to you, I am really sorry. I don't wish this upon anybody, but if you can control it, if you can mitigate those risks, if you can reduce the harm to yourself and others, please, please, please do so. Now, I want to get back to the whole subspace is basically your brain on drugs thing. So you basically become incoherent sometimes when you're in subspace. Everybody's experience is their own, but for me, I just can no longer access the English language, and I don't understand a lot of words that people are saying, and I'm like, I think they asked me if I was doing okay, but like, what are the words for that? And usually I become so like laughy and giggly that like everything is a joke. And so I'm just like, yeah, sure, da da da. And I'll be like really teasy and jokey. And like, if I'm saying words, they're probably not anything that's making sense to anybody else. And that can be a really big problem for in-scene communication. It may not go so far as the whole like somebody will abuse you in subspace thing that I just talked about, but it can be really difficult during a scene to like give good feedback to your partner when you're in subspace. Like, are you still green, or is that yellow, or you're just like ba da da da, and your partner's like, I have no idea what that means. And so either come up with some kind of alternative that you can do while you're in subspace. Having nonverbal components like being able to remember to drop a certain item or ring a bell can be helpful, but even that is not completely foolproof, because sometimes when you go into subspace, suddenly the bell just becomes a fun toy and you're like, wee, I have a bell, it's so exciting, yay. And so that's not necessarily a reliable method, which is again why so many DOMs, when their partner becomes non-communicative in subspace, will wrap up or just stop the scene because you are no longer in control of your body at that point. The other things that we don't talk about with subspace in terms of risk, besides the non-communication and the difficulty with accessing the real world, is it changes your pain tolerance for a lot of people. If you are engaging in subspace through play that is brought on by physical pain or physical stimulus of some kind, oftentimes your pain tolerance go like whoop, like, you know, you could be fucking ran over by a truck and you probably wouldn't care because that's where your pain tolerance is at. And this gets dangerous, coupled especially with that whole non-communication thing, because if you are in a deep scene, if you are intending to play with a heavy scene, and your partner is like spanking you with a cricket bat, if that goes badly and you're in your like normal state of mind, your body will process bad pain and kind of be like, ow, no, that was like bad hit. Like, don't hit my kneecaps, please hit higher, you know, or don't hit, you know, my sciatica nerve or whatever it happens to be. But when you are in subspace, you don't have that same relationship with pain anymore. Either you're just totally beyond it or everything feels good. And so you could very much end up in a situation where you're fracturing things, you're bruising things really, really deeply in ways that you weren't expecting to have to heal. You know, if you have anything in terms of maybe you have, you know, implants, you've had recent surgery, you know, you have a hip replacement, I don't know. You know, you're potentially risking damage to your body that normally your body would alert you to, but because you're in subspace, you are just not aware is even happening. So you have to be able to trust your Dom to know how to control their strength, to know when to slow things down or to not exceed a certain level. But again, you need trust for that. So please don't be doing this on purpose with strangers if you can help it, because it can be bad. Now, the last thing that I want to bring up in terms of risks involving subspace is that you can feel like really physically almost ill after you've experienced subspace. We talk about all the nice shiny parts, as we often do, but we don't talk about the gross stuff that happens afterwards. Even with the best aftercare, you can still have negative feelings after a BDSM scene. You can still feel like crap, you can feel sick, you can get run down, it can make you more susceptible to actually getting like a viral or bacterial infection. You can be really irritable, you can be crabby, you can be really sleepy, you can cry a lot. There's a lot of things that can happen because your brain has basically like dumped out all of these chemicals, it's expended all of that energy to produce that, and now suddenly all of those things have gone away. So a couple of days after the scene, after you've experienced subspace, suddenly you can just feel like you have the flu. And that is not something I think that everybody knows about or is prepared for. And it's important to be aware, you know, if you have an important meeting in 2 days, maybe going into subspace and having a really deep scene isn't a good idea, because you don't want to be knocked out in bed with basically the flu because of a scene you did 2 days before. So yeah, that's basically what I want to talk about. I don't want to make this like another 30-minute long video, so I think that is enough information for now. You know, I don't want to scare anybody. Subspace can still be a really fun and fulfilling and connective experience, but you can have just as much fun doing BDSM without it. And I just really, really want everybody to hold on to that idea. You are valid if you don't do subspace. You are a perfectly beautiful, wonderful, worthy, submissive, slave, pet, whatever you are, without ever having experienced subspace. And I hope that you know that. So anyways, that's all for today's video. If you want to see more from me and you haven't already, please subscribe. I make videos twice a week, comments, all that good stuff down below. And if you want to see more from me and you want to support my work, the best place you can do that is over on Patreon. I have tons of exclusive perks and rewards. Thank you so much if you do already support me. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you guys next time, hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.